For today's episode, I want to discuss depression in different ages, from kids to teens into adulthood. So I would like to dive deep into these three different areas of life and highlight the different areas we need to pay more attention to. So we're going to start with the youngest age, which would be, of course, kids, and then work our way into adulthood. With kids who deal with different types of depression, it can be very tricky for parents to recognize those symptoms or the changes in their child, because growing up you would associate the changes like their tantrums and outbursts as growing pains. Now when I say growing pains, I mean these are things that they go through and do as they grow into teenagers, and then eventually they grow out of. So we almost say they're just growing pains, like throwing tantrums or throwing things and doing these things that you think is just normal for a kid to be doing. Also, this could be in teenagers too. Oh, that's just normal. They're being a normal teen as well. But these are the things that we would say would be growing pains, because they're things that eventually they're going to grow out of. And also, because they're so young, it can be very tricky to recognize that your child could be suffering from some type of depression. This is because it can occur from any age from 3 to 13. And we start at 3 years old because this is around the time where your child starts creating those first memories. Usually anything before 3 you sort of can't remember, but usually after 3, those are the memories that if you think back hard enough, you can almost start relating back to certain periods of your life. So you almost think, well, what could cause a child to become sad or to develop some type of depression? Well, this can come from any type of trauma that is too much for the kid and an event that occurs in their life, like parents getting divorced, being away from their parents for too long, having a fear from a certain type of animal. The older they get, it gets into going to school. Will I fit in at school? Will I make friends at school? Now they're dealing with homework. Am I going to learn the homework? Do I understand what's going on? Am I learning slower than everybody else? And then the more older they get into their teenagers, the puberty hits. So for girls, it's my body's changing and now I'm getting a period. And for guys, it's also their body is changing and their voice is changing and they're starting to get facial hair, and some get it earlier than others. With guys or girls, puberty hits at different times, and these can be, like, for some very traumatic if they're early bloomers or late bloomers. Another thing is when you're that young, it's very difficult for a child to understand their emotions and to come out and say exactly what's going on and what's wrong with them. Because as a child, when you don't understand what's going on, how can you communicate to your parents and tell them exactly what's going on with you? Like, you're feeling sad and lonely and you just wouldn't know how to really communicate. So as a child, it would be hard to be struggling with something that you just quite don't understand yourself. This is another reason for parents it can be very difficult, because when your child is going through this, and because they're so young and they don't realize what they're going through and they can't communicate it to you, it's really hard for you to understand. Because again, when they start throwing these tantrums and they're getting upset and they're crying all the time, to you it's just them being a kid. So you try to find the ways, okay, why are you upset and how can we fix this? And you might not even realize that that's what they're going through, or that they might be dealing with some type of depression, but for you, they're just being a normal child. So I think that it's important for any parent to talk to their kids from an early age, when you know they might understand more about their emotions and what they're feeling, and let them know that they can be open with you and come to you and tell you if they're feeling off or if they're feeling sad or if just something doesn't feel right to them. Because again, it's hard for them as kids to really understand their feelings, but if they feel like they can go to their parents and openly talk about it and share it, it might be easier for both of you to come together and understand exactly what they're going through. That's why as a parent, if your kid starts being extra cranky or throwing tantrums even more or acting out, this might be another trigger for you to realize that maybe there is something more going on and they can't tell you what's going on because they might be so young that you might need to pay more attention to and figure out exactly why your child's upset or why they're sad all the time or why they're crying all the time. That would be your attention grabber to say, okay, hey, maybe something is wrong here and I need to figure out what it is. Another thing to pay attention to is if they're withdrawal from conversations or they don't interact with other kids, their eating habits change, their sleeping habits change, just anything that is out of the ordinary that isn't normal for them and they weren't doing it before but now they're doing it now is something again to pay more attention to. This is why again it's hard for parents because your kids are kids and they're going to have outbursts and they're going to do things that are not normal, and sometimes it's hard to associate what's the normal reaction they would have over to the reactions they're having now. So are their outbursts now normal, or is their crying habits normal? And these things are very picky here and there, so it's so hard to say, oh yeah, you're crying more than you should be, or you're doing this more than you should be, so maybe something else is wrong. Or like I said, for some parents it's just, oh, I think they're just being a kid and at some point they'll grow out of it. So the important thing to know is that if you think your child is struggling, you go to the doctor or a health provider and you openly talk to them about it, so then they could also sit and maybe talk to you and your child and figure out if they might be struggling from depression or some other mental illness. Because when you bring it to their attention and you start telling them all these things that you've been keeping track of how your kid has changed and now they're doing this and you feel like this is a little off, they can help give you the information so you understand more about what might be going on with your kid and things that they might not be able to tell you. Another thing too is that kids can experience these symptoms and they eventually go away. For other kids, they experience this as a child and it never goes away and it follows them into their teens and into their adulthood. So no matter what, it's important to just pay attention to your kid. Yes, it could just be normal stuff and eventually it could be growing pains and eventually it goes away, but sometimes it could be something that you might think isn't as bad as you think it is, but it could be a little something that might be bad, so it might be something to pay attention to and just keep as noted as your kid grows. So next we're going to talk about the teenager. And I mean, even as adults now, you know how tough it was to be a teenager and how easy it was for some of us to get away with things we didn't want our parents to know. So it's hard enough being a teen, but being a teen who's now dealing with depression can be even harder. And again, just as kids might not be able to explain to you what's going on, teens might not be able to explain to you what's going on, because with everything that comes with being a teen, with your body changing and getting older, there's some emotions that they might just not understand fully, and they might also think it's just them getting older and becoming a teenager, but it might also be something more. So I think one of the biggest secrets for teens is that they hide that they're struggling with depression. Because again, as a teenager, there were things that you didn't tell your parents and that you did that you hid from them. And with a teen who's struggling with depression, this can just be something else that they decide they don't openly want to talk to their parents about, because a lot of teens don't want their parents to know that they're having issues. And again, teens are dealing with a lot of different issues like peer pressure and academic expectations, like getting good grades, attending school every day, making sure everything is perfect for their parents so they can make them happy. And of course, their body's changing. For parents with teens, just like when you have a growing kid, it can be very hard for you to distinctly see these changes and notice that your teen is struggling. The biggest thing to notice in your teenager would be sadness, loneliness, they're annoyed with you all the time, their loss of interest in things, rejection, and of course, failure. All of these can start slowly leading your teenager into depression and being sad because now they feel like they can't live up to those expectations that maybe some parents set for them or the expectations they set for themselves. If you believe your teen is struggling with depression, try to openly talk about this. Now, this can be difficult because a lot of teens don't want to talk to their parents about anything. They don't like sharing with their parents because, of course, a lot of them feel like their parents are judgmental or they just won't understand and think that what they're talking about isn't really what they're going through and might just brush it under the rug. So they might just feel like talking to their parents are pointless. And I know there are some of you out there that are adults now who felt like that as a teen. Well, if I go and talk to my mom or my dad, they're really not going to understand what I'm going through, so why even try? Or if I say something, they're just going to come back with, oh, well, when I was a kid, I didn't have those troubles and I didn't go through that, so I'm not even going to even give it a try, and I'll just keep it to myself. But I think it's a good thing to try to have open conversations with your teen about how their life's going, how school's going, how things are going with their friends, how they feel like things are going well in their life at home, if there's anything you can help them with, if there's anything they feel like they're struggling with, they might want to talk to you about, and just try to help them understand that you are there to support them and understand them and talk to them, and you are not going to be judgmental, even if they feel like you will, that you're simply there and you're on their side, and they can just be open with you whenever they want. Because another thing you can help them do is figure out ways to get through those overwhelming feelings, or those feelings where they feel overwhelmed with school and friends and homework and family life, just anything they feel overwhelmed with. You would be able there to help them and find ways to make it easier on them, because of course, you don't want to see a child struggling, but you don't want to see your teen struggling either. You want to make it easier for them, because as kids and teens, they shouldn't be struggling. They should be enjoying life and going out and doing things. So when you have a teen who struggles with depression, it can be hard on you as a parent because you just don't want to see your teen going through that, and you want to find ways that you can help them live a happier life. Again, just like if you think your child is struggling with depression, if you think your teen is struggling with depression, going to a doctor or a health provider can help out so much, because then you and your teen can sit with a doctor and talk about all the things that have been going on and the things they've been struggling with, and it might just be helpful to get it all out, so then the doctor can help maybe pinpoint those triggering things and help you and your teen start figuring out ways to cope. Another thing that your teen might be interested in, maybe not all teens, but some, is talking to a therapist, because now this is somebody on the outside who doesn't know their life to life, who doesn't know their past, knows their struggles, and this is someone they could almost feel that they can be open with, because they won't be judging them on their life or telling them that they're wrong. It's just somebody that can understand them more and be able to also help them pinpoint those triggering moments, or almost remember maybe that event in their life that maybe started to lead them into the sadness and into depression, and help them find ways to cope with that, so things start to get a little bit easier for them, so they don't always feel so overwhelmed. Finding out more information overall for you and your teen is just going to be so much helpful for both of you. So now you have a better understanding of what's going on with them physically and mentally, so you as a parent can also start helping them figure out those trigger warnings, or figure out what type of things they can do to cope with it. Of course, I'm sure as doctors would, they would prescribe your child or your teen with some type of medicine to help them and eventually they might get over it and they might not deal with depression anymore. But again, this could be something that could lead straight into adulthood, which of course leads us into adulthood. Now, as adults, it is sometimes, but not always, easy for us to understand what we're going through either. Because with all these new feelings and emotions that we might be feeling, we might not realize that all the sadness that is coming up is leading us to depression or has led us into having depression. But you know when you're sad, and you will start to realize when that sadness is there for a longer period of time and doesn't go away. We can start to notice those days where we feel off, or we wake up and we just don't feel like ourselves. We can notice those days where, for some, there's those days where you have a great day and then you come home and just cry for no reason. And the more you start to notice the sadness coming on, the more you might look into what's really going on with you. Another thing we might start to notice is weight gain, our appetite changes, our sleep changes. We feel just overpowering loneliness, and these are the things that come along when you are dealing with depression. See, now I think it's much easier as an adult to start slowly realizing these little symptoms that you're going through, and it almost might be easier for you to go to a doctor and say, hey, I'm feeling this way, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, can you help me? And they can help lead you into the answer of what's going on with you. And that's why, again, as a child and a teen, it's a little bit difficult because you're growing up and there's so much that comes with growing up and with everything that goes along to becoming a teenager. It's just harder to lock down those changes that are happening and the feelings that you're having, because growing up you have all these different types of feelings, and when you become an adult it's almost easier to realize when those things are happening. And it's also maybe easier for as an adult to think about, maybe you struggle with depression your whole life and you just didn't know it, so now you can almost go back into your life and find maybe that event in your life that led you to having depression, or maybe there's something that triggers it and that led you into being sad and feeling lonely and now dealing with depression. And I think the thing is too, for us as adults, you can just put a fake smile on and act like you're happy and hide your feelings. But as kids and teens, it's almost a little harder to do that, because as parents, you're so prone to your kids' reactions and the way they respond to things that it's a little bit easier to pick up on. But as an adult, you start to learn these ways where you can slowly start hiding the way you feel from others, and it's much easier to get away with than when you're growing up and dealing with depression. So some of us, of course, seek help from doctors and therapists, and others don't, and they just find ways to either cope by themselves, or they read up on it and they just figure it out themselves, and they don't feel like they need to go to a doctor or a therapist. Another thing I would like to get out of the way is that depression is not a part of getting older. For some people, they almost think that this is something that happens the older you get, and that is totally false. There are so many people that have never experienced depression and will never experience depression. Again, you can experience these times of sadness, but you're not going to ever experience the amount of sadness that you would feel with depression. So for people to almost think, oh, it's just something that comes along with getting older, is not true at all. You're more likely to experience depression in adulthood rather than as a child or a teen. It doesn't mean that's something that just comes along with you getting older. It's the changes in the brain that happen when something triggers it, or something big in your life happens, and that event starts to trigger the sadness that leads you into depression. And of course, can start to make you spiral out of control the deeper into depression you get. I would like to say, if you haven't seen it, in my very first episode, I talked about what depression is and how it can affect your feelings and your thoughts and the changes that come along with that. And when I did that, that research that I did is mostly on adults, because again, I think it's very rarely that you have these events as kids and teens. But again, you can experience it as a kid and a teen for a very short amount of time and then never experience it again. But then again, there are these traumatic events that can happen to you as a child and a teen that will keep with you into adulthood. Now, as an adult, you might understand it more and be able to look back and now fully understand that event that has led you there, but mostly it is in adults. But this is because, again, as a parent of a kid and a teenager, it can be very challenging for you to notice these things and these changes in your kids. And it can be something that even if they struggle as a kid and struggle as a teen, and then the older they get into adulthood, they're still struggling with depression, you might not know as a parent until they're old enough to almost figure it out themselves that they've been struggling this whole time, because it's very hard, again, to notice as they grow up. Mostly because they can't share that with you. They can't share their feelings. Teenagers, of course, can. A lot of teenagers won't. But as a child, because you're going through so much, it's very hard to explain your feelings or the emotions you're going through, because you're so small and yourself, you don't fully understand it. So this is why the older we get, the more in tune I think we are with our bodies and our thoughts and our emotions, that we can fully more understand what's going on than while we're growing up and when we're younger. Overall, no matter who's struggling with depression, what age you're struggling with depression, it's always important to seek help. And this is because it helps you understand more about depression and understand what you're going through, and to get the treatment you need, and to find those ways to help you cope, and maybe to find those triggers that you can step back from, or when you see the trigger coming, you can stop it from happening. Overall, it's just going to help you more. And again, this is why a lot of people who experience depression go to therapy, because even as a kid or a teenager, if you go through something traumatic, even as an adult, it can be very scary to openly talk to your family and your friends about something that happened to you. So going to a therapist who, again, knows nothing about your past, who can't judge you, who is there to listen to you and openly talk about your feelings and figure out what you're going through and find those triggers and find those coping mechanisms, is so important to people. Because again, this is somebody who is from the outside, not being able to judge you because they have no clue what happened through your whole life. They are just now hearing it for the first time while you're telling them. So I think not only going to a doctor, but maybe seeing a therapist will be helpful. And that's why I've always said I've never went to a therapist, but it might be helpful just to be able to have somebody else to just openly talk to about it and feel comfortable just being yourself and talking out everything that you're going through, that just will completely understand and be there for you no matter what. So I hope this can give you a little bit of insight of how depression can affect all different ages and different points in your life. I also hope that maybe this can help some parents who might have a child or a teen that might be acting out more than they normally would, to maybe realize that maybe they're struggling with something more that they first don't understand and that you don't understand, so you can get the help that is needed for them, and also just for you to be able to completely understand what's happening. And even if it's not depression, it's just very important to pay attention to your kids and your teens growing up. And it's also very important to pay attention to the things you go through as an adult that can help lead you to figuring out if you're struggling with any type of mental health issue, and to figure out how to understand it more, and to figure out ways to have it not control your life and live as normal life as possible. So like always, I end every episode with I want you to always know that you are never alone and that I love you.